Hello and welcome to Henwood Court's debut webinar. Just 3 weeks ago, if you told me I'd be hosting a webinar, I'd have laughed at you. This is an example of how adaptable we and our businesses need to be during these unprecedented times. Other new things I've learned include Zoom, Microsoft Teams, the House Party app, while we're also looking at Calendly, Otter AI and Asana. While we've dusted off the old things I did not think we'd ever see again, such as the Wii Fit, the old dartboard, a skipping rope and some rusting dumbbells. We are all contending with no end of problems and challenges at the moment, whether it be personal health, keeping our families safe and well, feeding the elderly and the vulnerable members of our family, friends and in the community. Even shopping and exercise is a major test at the moment. The business owner has all this to contend with and much more. Never before have we witnessed businesses come under such intense pressure, and there's so many significant challenges that we're facing, especially those companies that rely on people coming through the door, who have seen a complete disappearance of their income and whose focus, of course, is on survival. Most companies will survive, but it's only a few that will avoid a downturn in turnover and profits. Massive disruption to supply lines and internal operations, with many having to relocate, centralised operations to remote ones, with employees spread far and wide. Then, of course, there's a task of managing employees, supervising their well-being and workload, and they face disruption working from homes, particularly those who've never worked from home before. And they've got to balance those work pressures, especially if they have young children at home where they have to teach as well. At Henwood Court, we've been helping our business owner clients where possible with support and guidance and a referral to a trusted professional that can help, and that's where the idea of this webinar has come from. We brought this panel of experts together to offer some insight, guidance and practical tips to as many people as we can. So firstly, I'd like to thank you all for giving time to this webinar out of your busy diaries and joining me and the expert panelists for this hastily arranged webinar that I hope for you is going to be full of practical tips, support for you, the business owner and their key managerial staff. It's also lovely to see so many friends and Henwood Court clients on here. So again, thank you for supporting this event. I'm sure you'll get some benefit from it. I'd also like to thank the panelists. We've got an A-list panel really, all experts in their respective fields. The biographies of the panelists are available and will be sent to you afterwards, and they all tell me they're happy to answer any individual questions you have throughout this webinar or indeed afterwards. So we may not be able to answer all of your questions because it is a packed agenda, but again, the individuals are quite happy to field these afterwards. So the webinar is full of practical advice and support, and I'd really like to start first and foremost with Pippa Hawkes from BSN Chartered Accountants, who will provide us with the latest update of the support packages available from the government, including what you and your employees are entitled to, and will also give us some hints and tips on cash flow. So I'd like to invite Pippa to speak first, please.
Thanks, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pippa Hawkes. I'm from BSN Chartered Accountants. And I just wanted to talk through some of the business support packages that the government have got in place for us as business owners, and just try and dispel a few myths, I guess. So first of all, the much talked about job retention scheme and the question of to furlough or not to furlough. A lot of questions that I've had from clients are around sort of what the term means. Obviously, this scheme has been put in place to try and prevent redundancies. And so it is mainly where employees have no work that can be done either from home or there is insufficient work for them to do in the business. Particularly, this is to support businesses that have had to close. And there will be more on this from my legal colleague, Jonathan, a bit later on. But from a tax perspective, the government have provided support for an 80% grant of gross pay for these workers that have been furloughed. And that is to cover up to a maximum of £2,500 per employee. It will also cover employers' national insurance, and it will also cover employers' auto enrolment costs. So it's actually a brilliant scheme that the government's brought out. This will be available on an online portal to claim the money back through the usual sort of payroll route. Now, that online portal is not yet open. We're hoping that that will be open at the end of April, and I would suggest keeping your eyes on the government website that is detailed on the slides below for any updates about when that is open. The next really good thing the government has done for us is the VAT deferment period. Now, this is an immediate cash injection for any VAT registered businesses. The VAT quarter ended 30th of June 2020. You will still need to submit your normal VAT return through the normal procedures, but you don't have to pay the tax outstanding on that VAT until the 5th of April 2021. So it's a really good payment holiday for a lot of businesses. Now, I would suggest if you pay your VAT on direct debit, that you may want to cancel your direct debit, because I don't think the government will be organised enough to cancel the whole country's direct debits. So I've been recommending to clients they do that. Finally, we move to self-assessment, and the good news is anyone who comes under the self-assessment regime, your July payment on account that you would normally be making, that has been deferred until the 31st of January 2021. So that's excellent news and gives a little payment holiday for us all. In addition, last Friday, the government brought out lots of measures to help self-employed individuals. Now, this will be only accessible for people who over half of their income comes from self-employed trading, and they earn less than £50,000 per year. And the government will actually be contacting each individual that this is applicable to over the course of the next few months. And we believe the money will be available to the individuals in the form of a grant by the end of June 2020. Now, this will be treated as taxable income for the following tax year. So it is a short-term method of assistance that will then be taxed later on by the government. The final thing I can suggest to you all as business owners is there is a hotline that's been set up, and the number is in the slides if you want to jot that down. And we are finding from calls to HMRC that they are being much more accommodating than usual for things such as corporation tax time to pay and also PAYE. So it's worth giving them a call if you're struggling. Finally, we've had many questions about the business interruption loans, and I would suggest that you look on the British Banking website for all the government accredited approved lenders. I've put the details of a few there, the logos of some local ones in the Midlands, but there are many more. And also, I can only suggest that you speak to your current incumbent bank and get some support from them. I believe also that the Chancellor will be announcing some further measures later on today in the form of overdraft support and just giving some more details about this scheme for businesses. If we could just flip to the next slide, please, Nick. So what can you do as a business owner? Cash is always king, as we know, and hopefully everyone's monitoring their cash very closely. I would suggest speaking to your finance providers if you've got any hire purchase or lending on any machinery or equipment, making sure you fully understand your cost base, speaking to your suppliers, ensuring that you keep and maintain good relationships with them, look at any payment plans that you might be able to put in place with them to support your cash flow. Take the right HR advice on staff, make sure you're managing your staff so that they are productive where they can be, and if they can't be, they're put on the right measures. And first and foremost, prepare a weekly cash flow. I've just done a small chart there for something I've been working on with a client this week, looking at the major ins and outs of cash over the coming weeks so they can easily make sure they manage big ins before the outs have to go out. And I can only advise to really concentrate on that. And finally, just looking at opportunities to make your business more agile and to work from remote locations. which I think some of the other speakers will be talking about a bit later on. So that's all we've got time for, and happy to take a question, which I think we've had one question come through, which I know a lot of people have been asking, from Nick from Hardy Signs. And Nick has been asking about the grey area surrounding directors' pay, where a lot of directors will be taking a mixture of a very low salary through a PAYE scheme and dividends. Now, unfortunately, dividends aren't covered by either the job retention scheme or the self-employed income scheme. So there's no packages available from the government to cover that loss of earnings. I guess dividends are a discretionary method of remuneration by the business for shareholders based on the profitability of the business. So the government haven't covered this so far, although there has been petitioning to look at that. And as far as we are aware, directors on the PAYE scheme may be able to be furloughed. But again, the guidance is very unclear from HMRC, and I think it will be on a case-by-case circumstance as to whether directors will be allowed to apply for that. So I think watch this space. When the online portal is opened by the government, we'll probably know more at that stage.
Thank you, Pippa. Katie, is there any more questions that have come through for Pippa?
Yes, we do have one from James Merrick at Burley Brown. Is there a likelihood of the government claiming back the furlough grants in the future?
Very, very hard to answer. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to pay for all of the support as a country that the government's giving. So I would suggest making sure all of your records are well kept throughout this period. You've got the right legal and HR advice for all the employees that you've put on this scheme, and just making sure that you're doing the right thing ethically as well in your business. You know, I think a lot of people may try and take advantage of the scheme, and no doubt they will be called into question later on. But I think if you're a business that has really suffered because of this, particularly, we know, hospitality and leisure sort of sectors, or, you know, things where there's physical work that can't be done from home, then absolutely the government is set up to support with that. So just a case of keeping all the records as best you can, so that if there is ever an audit, you've got a trail to go back to.
Okay, Pippa, thank you very much. There will be opportunity for more questions and answers at the end of the webinar, but we've got a packed agenda. So I'd now like to invite Paul Faulkner, please. Paul is CEO of the Greater Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, and they're doing some absolutely sterling work at the moment, supporting businesses at the moment. Paul will outline their 10-point plan for supporting business during the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everybody who's on and watching this. Yeah, I think, you know, from the Chamber's point of view, fundamentally, what we want to do is to keep business moving through this period, and to ensure that businesses are as well placed as possible to sort of spring back into action once we are through that, whenever that is. I mean, that's very high level and general. And there's a number of ways that we're doing it. Three that I'll touch on in the time that we have. So one thing that we're trying to do is very much to signpost to sort of all of the key information and all of the advice that is out there. So very much building on what Pippa has just sort of touched on. And at the Chamber, we do this an awful lot, where we're sort of taking public sector announcements and we try to translate them somewhat into layman's terms. So we're sort of simplifying and trying to make it easy for people to keep on top of the sort of plethora of announcements that are coming through. So you'll see lots of regular updates from the Chamber. We've produced an easy to read, easy to access grid, which is summarizing all of the different sort of measures, what they are and when they're likely to sort of flow through. So there's almost one document that you want to visit. I'd recommend sort of looking at that. And it's now gone to 3 sides. We're already on to our 5th version. But I think it's massively important. I mean, last night, the announcements from the Chancellor came out at 10:30 at night. There may be more again today. So people are being bombarded. And obviously the government are having to design and build this as they go. So one of the roles we're playing is to try to collate that and make it easy for people to understand, so that ultimately they know what they can do and they know how to get the money that is on offer into their pockets, because that's absolutely crucial. The second key thing that we're doing, and it links into our 10-point plan really, is to lobby. And certainly, you know, we're kind of, the two key points I would say that are in there are around getting cash quickly through to businesses. There's been a lot has been announced, but the key is getting it through, because we know that a hell of a lot of businesses do not have the luxury of time or of sort of long-term cash planning. When you look at the number of businesses who probably don't even have a spare cash beyond 1 month, is quite frightening. So getting the cash through quickly, and also sort of picking up all of the stuff that falls through the gaps. Nick's excellent question there on sort of the position of directors being one such. And so where there are issues which are falling through the gaps, and that's understandable because the government are having to put this all together at a breakneck speed, what we're trying to do is, again, collate commonalities and feed those into the powers that be. And that's directly into MPs, directly into government. That's ourselves, and also using the British Chamber network, but also working very, very closely with local authorities, Birmingham and all around the regions, LEPs and the combined authorities as well. So there's a lot of lobbying going on to make sure that collectively the right measures are put in place and also executed quickly, because as I say, I think getting cash through to businesses ASAP is critical. And then the third key element that we're working on is sort of ongoing support. So there's a lot of activity that we're running right now. There's an awful lot of communications going out there. Certainly every morning we're popping out a daily news bulletin. It's something we've always done. We're continuing it through here. It's free for everyone to sign up to. It's your sort of touch point for what is happening in the region, and obviously got an awful lot of, or dominated by, coronavirus material right now. But if you're not subscribed to that, I recommend everyone just goes on our website and signs up. It's a great way of keeping up to speed. We're running digital networking now, certainly every day on our sort of social media platforms, trying to just help bring people together to connect them and get that sense of sort of business going on. And then a lot of sort of webinars are now starting to be rolled out. We've done one earlier this week on sort of business survival through this situation. And yesterday we ran a Grow Through People conference, which is sort of 5 hours of material about how sort of leadership development, people management, which, you know, it's absolutely critical at all times and probably has been heightened right now. And so really there, it's trying to share best practice and thought leadership and make sure that everyone can access that and really sharpen up, so that as we go through this tough period, they're as well placed as they possibly can be to survive. And then once we come through, to thrive once again. So I think, you know, we're trying to share some positivity as well. We're trying to encourage people to think about the opportunities that exist right now and will do in the future, and definitely to prepare for what lies beyond us, prepare for sort of things to unlock. And I think, you know, we're working with a lot of great people. One who I think particularly are doing some brilliant work right now, Curium Solutions. You may have sort of be aware of them or seen some of the stuff they're doing. It's very much forward thinking. So it's really from our side, trying to spin an awful lot of plates. It's deal with the here and now. It's making sure that people are thinking about what they can be doing down the line. It's lobbying like hell to make sure that issues which are impacting businesses are heard by the powers that be, and they really understand the urgency of that. And ultimately, it is back to trying to keep business moving through this period.
Superb. Thank you, Paul. As a chamber member, the resources that you've made available to me and my business, and I know other businesses, has been absolutely superb. So thank you for your help there, and continue lobbying for us. Okay, moving quickly on, I'd now like to bring Jason Pitt into the fore. Jason is Chief Executive Officer of Made in the Midlands, and he's going to provide us some insights into good practices and businesses that his membership are getting involved with at the moment. So Jason, over to you.
Afternoon, Nick.
Good afternoon.
Everybody in the audience. I'd like to echo some of what Paul has said. And I think our sort of vision of this is to keep the Made community connected, keep business connected. And whilst we've got social distancing, we can't afford to be disconnected from each other. And I think, obviously, I follow what Paul's doing at the Chamber of Commerce. They do some great work there. They've probably got a stronger lobbying platform than us. But some of the things I just want to sort of talk about, some of the findings that we found. So the business loan scheme, we did a webinar with Lloyds Bank, started last week. We did a survey this week, and we were disappointed to learn that only 20% of members had applied for this loan, and 30% of them had actually been turned down, which it isn't in the spirit of the agreement. So we're writing out to the banks of each of the companies that tell us that they're having this refused on a case-by-case basis. But also we call on all trade associations to really kind of enforce the fact that this money probably needs to just be given direct by government to the companies. If we've got the financial companies creating a bottleneck, we would ask them to sort of remove those bottlenecks, or for the government to intervene and really kind of direct to those companies. I guess the VAT deferment is a huge help, because that's the equivalent of a cash injection. Similar to Paul's 10-point plan, we've got 5 sort of key components to how we're going to help companies. So firstly, we do this huge exhibition once a year. We do one in the Midlands, one in Yorkshire. And I think, as you've seen, trade shows have been cancelling, Wimbledon's cancelled, all of these events are cancelled. And I think a lot of people have decided, well, we'll just postpone it 3 months to see what will happen. And I think we need to inject some certainty into this. So we've decided to sort of, kind of replace this exhibition with a virtual exhibition. We're going to do something completely new with the virtual exhibition called Back in Britain. And in addition to the Back in Britain virtual exhibition, virtual event, which is going to be a very visual experience, we're launching a Back in Britain campaign, which is an evolution of what we've already produced. So every member will get a Back in Britain logo. They can display it in their marketing material. We could extend this to other trade associations. We're happy to collaborate with anybody at the moment. I think the challenge is so big that we all need to kind of reach out to each other. I think in past times we would perhaps be a little bit more protective of our ideas, but I think now we're at a time that we need to come together, collaborate. If there's an opportunity to come together, then everybody needs to do that, whether that be a competitor or not. So we're developing this Back in Britain campaign because reshoring is going to be huge. I think, as we found, that short lead times in the supply chain are crucial. It's a big barrier to why we can't get PPE equipment out and get these ventilators turned around quickly, because every country's got the same problem. Every country wants to look after its own citizens first, and we need to have that capacity in the UK. So I think you'll see reshoring, localization of supply chains. Does not mean that we won't export. We could export the same as, maybe more in the future, but having supply chains that are clustered together locally makes sense. It's good for the environment, it's good for the companies, it's good for the community, and it's good for the innovation. It's a lot easier to innovate if you're a neighbouring company. You can see the problem perhaps a little bit more detailed than if you're 6,000 miles away. So I'd encourage reshoring to continue. I think that's going to be a big push from obviously what we're telling people to do. We're doing web development, so we've introduced some new features, webinars, a bit like yourself, Nick. We're developing a live chat module, so every company who has a microsite will be able to engage with people on their own website. And we're also introducing quite a few other things in terms of web development. We're working with BCU to develop artificial intelligence within the platform, so that's something which I'm trying to fast forward and get that launched as quickly as possible. And then possibly a supply chain project. So one of the big disappointing things I've seen, well, let's start off with the positives. So what the positives are, there are lots of members who have participated in, have created solutions to problems. They're actively creating face masks. They're in the supply chain of ventilators, and that's brilliant. And they're pivoting towards medical. But one of my concerns would be that I've spoken to some trade associations, some smaller companies who've got capacity, and they've just not been contacted. And part of the problem with that is we assume that the big companies have all of the answers, and that's simply not true. If you look at where innovation comes from the SMEs, and Paul will probably know this better than anybody else. Even if you go to Google or Amazon, if you look at Alexa and you look at Google Home, the natural language processing technology that was developed by Google, for example, did not come from Google. They bought a company and brought that technology in, and that often happens with bigger companies. So we must include big companies because they've got the resources, they've got the best people. Having said that, we can't exclude small companies because small companies are sitting on a lot of innovation, and we need everybody's participation. So we need the collective intelligence of all of the business community, not only the big companies. So I'd appeal to government and all trade associations to actively look at the smaller companies and the medium-sized companies. These people not only have good ideas, but they're sitting there saying, we want to help, we want to be part of this. How can we get involved? How can we do something? We've got to give them something. We can't exclude them. So I'd say that that's absolutely important. And a sort of, kind of final thought, which is we need to remain calm. So there are 3 states that we can go in. We can fight, we can flight, and we can freeze. And I suppose the ultimate fear is freeze, isn't it? In human nature and in business, especially the people in the executive team, they've got to remain calm. Yeah, they've got to steady the ship. They've got to save the ship and do whatever it takes to make those tough decisions. But they've got to remain in control. And one of the tools that we've developed, and I know that there's many other organisations that do this, such as Vistage, and there's plenty of others. But we've decided to introduce virtual masterminds. So using the Zoom technology, the Zoom platform, we're inviting 10 members to join a mastermind group. So we've started off with, we're trying to get 100 people through these mastermind groups, where 10 people would connect with each other, and we'll try and match them as best as we can. They're not a sales meeting. They're very much, every session we will debate and discuss two key challenges. So over the period of some months, we'll hopefully get around everybody's challenge. We'll meet up more frequently than you would do in a mastermind group. So once every fortnight for just an hour or 2. So I don't think we've got all of the answers, but I think the answers are out there. I think it's important to just connect people, and we'll be an extension of each other and share that knowledge, and that's really how we'll get through this. We won't get through this by being many people in isolation. We'll get through this by coming together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. I think there's some key messages there from Jason and Paul, really, that we need to collude together, we need to come together, we need to share ideas and help one another. I think that's the key messages from both Jason and Paul, and both of their organisations are interpreting the information that's coming through and really seeing it from the coal face, exactly what's going on out there. I'd like to come on to the second section of the webinar now, please, and invite our very own practice manager, Anna Kavanagh, who is going to consider tips on working safely and effectively home for you and your employees, and maintaining collaboration between employees as well, and maintaining their well-being. And following that, Jonathan Forrester from Pickering's will look at the key areas about furloughing of employees. So I'd like to ask Anna to join us now, please.
Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone. With such a broad-ranging panel, we are time limited today, so I'll keep my commentary brief, highlighting the critical points. I've created a template from the Henwood Court policy, and this will be shared with you along with the webinar recording. You'll see to the right of the slide the timeline we experience within the business, not dissimilar to businesses across the country. It's amazing to comprehend just how agile as business owners we've had to be over the last 3 weeks. For most, we'll be currently working reactively. We will, in the coming weeks, as a new norm establishes itself, be able to and need to move to proactively considering business strategy. But for now, the in. If, like Henwood Court, you've moved the majority of your team to working from home, what should you be doing to ensure the team continues to perform effectively and safely? Write a policy. Yes, sorry, you need one. Doesn't seem like a priority, but it's important to be able to spell out to the team your expectations and in return what they can expect from you. So don't use your standard working from home policy. That may provide a really good starting point, but the circumstances of whole teams home working are unique and will bring with them their own challenges. So make the policy specific to the now. As essential, include contractual health and safety, GDPR and cybersecurity, and take advice on these areas. Provide checklists to evidence you've liaised with your team. ACAS have a useful home working checklist. Use your usual display screen equipment checklist. Assess with a nod, though, to these unique circumstances, be proportional and reasonable. Take professional advice as appropriate. For example, employees now having to homeschool a child with special needs or look after a toddler may ask for a contract variation. Take a view on this. What can your business tolerate? Next slide, please, Nick. All this is critically important and evidence is good governance in abnormal times, but to my mind, the most critical part of the continued success of your business beyond this period centres around how you manage your clients and your team over the next few weeks. Richard Branson's famous for saying, clients do not come first, your employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. It's that simple. Remember, your team comprises individuals, varied experience and competency, introverts and extroverts, parents, couples, singles, spouses of those working on the front line for the NHS. We all have our own unique story and we'll all react differently to this strange new norm. You need to always be mindful of this when dealing with your team. Remember, everybody will be working isolated in their own little silo. Do not underestimate the impact of this at all levels. And remember, your managers and supervisors are also new to working under these circumstances. My advice, having managed a team for many years that regularly had members working from home for differing amounts of their working week, is trust. Trust your team. Follow your instinct. As a good leader, you will intuitively know where the gaps could be and who may struggle. Although, as with any change, expect the unexpected. You may find the unlikeliest team member rises to the challenge, whilst the totally together, super organised member in the office may experience a wobble. Be flexible, be nimble, and most of all, be sentient to your team. The policy should be really specific as addressing goals, priorities, expectations, how staff will be supervised, measured. You may, of necessity, have to add in more formal lines of communication and supervision than you would usually have within the office. Remember that with immediate effect, you have lost the inherent in-office collaboration and the synergies you get from that. The across the office or at the coffee machine chats, sharing information or brainstorming a problem, or dealing just with a simple irritation. You'll need to establish those formal lines of communication to replace this loss or find your business strangled and without innovation. Spell out how and when you expect your team to communicate with your clients. This should be clearly and frequently. After this is all over, clients will remember who was there for them. Be present. The policy should also consider and provide a guide for employee well-being. Now is the time to lead a culture of wellness. Encourage the continuation of usual or establishment of new routines and rituals. Remember, employees won't have that usual commute to and from the office to wind down. Discourage bad habits such as working into the evening or sending an email at midnight. We all need a break. A well employee will be a motivated and productive employee. Engage with your team. Commit to how you want to emerge from this as a business. Communicate and lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Again, there will be time for questions for Anna at the end. And there is a resource where we're making available templates of our working from home policies that we've used with our members of the team. So this will be available to you when we send the information through via the webinar. I'd like to bring in now Jonathan Forrester from Pickering Solicitors, who's been extremely busy, as you can imagine, over the last few weeks. And he's going to provide us some key information about furloughing of employees. So over to you now, Jonathan.
Thanks, Nick, and welcome along everybody this afternoon. Thank you to Anna for giving me the opportunity to speak. As Nick said, Pickering Solicitors, and we've faced some challenges as everybody else has. We've got to work out new ways of working, and we've been able to use technology to assist with that and change the way we're working, change the way we're interacting with clients. But just what Anna said, you've still got to be there for your clients as much as you can. So try and use the technology and try and do the best that we all can in this new world. When I was asked to talk about today, obviously there's quite a few employment issues that have arisen over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they're continuing to arise. But the big one is obviously the furlough scheme. It's brand new. It's not something we've ever had before. It's not something we are well versed in, and we are all learning about furlough as we go along. I'm learning a lot. One of the problems with the furlough scheme at the moment, though, is whilst it's as a headline, it's a brilliant idea, and it works, or should work, very, very well. The problem that I think the government has faced is that they've rolled something out very swiftly to help business and to help employees, and the guidance that's out there is not yet legislation. It's not yet law. We're waiting for it. It was due to be published on Monday. There's been a delay for some reason. We don't know what that is. So we're waiting for it to be either converted into a statutory instrument or an act of parliament. And as soon as that comes out, we will have more flesh on the bones, if you like, more detail, so we can give exactly what we can and we can't do. At the moment, we're relying on the guidance, and we're giving, this is what our best guess is, this is what we think is going to happen, because there's no law in place yet to deal with it. But we are doing the best that we can. One of the big things that people need to know about furloughing employees is that it is a change to an employment contract. So you can't force somebody to be furloughed. You have got to get consent to furlough them, because it is a change in a contract. So you need to abide by the actual legislation that applies to changing contracts, talking to your employees, consulting with your employees as far as possible. Now, the consultations are short. They're not, a 20-day or a 45-day consultation period. It's a very short 20-minute consultation sometimes. But it's just, you need to make sure that you do still have some consultation to change the employment contract. I think it might be better if I'm asked questions about furlough so I can deal with specific things rather than just reading HMRC guidance to you, because you can all go onto the internet and read the guidance. Yeah. So I'm willing to take questions, whether now or whether you prefer to do it later, Nick, is entirely up to you.
Yeah, Jonathan, let's have one question now, Katie, if we may, on this subject.
Okay, we have an anonymous question that's come in. Can staff be disciplined whilst on the furlough leave for example, inappropriate posts on social media?
Yes, absolutely. What furlough does is it's a continuation of the employment contract. So it's not a break in employment. It's not a change to employment status, in as such as they remain your employee whilst furloughed. So they are still subject to all of your normal rules and procedures. So yes, disciplinary procedures can still take place while a member of staff is furloughed, because they are still your employee. Okay.
One from David Hemming. Furloughed employees obviously can't work for the business while on furlough. Can you raise a query or a question to a furloughed employee on what regarding work they are responsible for during this time?
Well, again, the guidance isn't crystal clear, but what it does say is that your staff can't do work for you that generates income. So what I think, if the question is, can I ring them up and say, what are you doing with customer X? Is there anything I can do? I personally don't see that you'll have a massive problem with that, because provided they're not talking to customer X and generating revenue for you, I think you are entitled to ask your employee questions. What they're not allowed to do is do any work. It's the same as your employees can do training while they're on furlough. So if they're doing an NVQ or something online, and this might be a good opportunity to have staff doing a little bit of training here and there, provided they're not generating revenue for you. It appears, and I caveat it with, we still need to wait for the legislation, but it appears that would be acceptable.
Okay, one more question, Katie, perhaps, and then we'll move on.
Okay, we'll do. There's so many. I'm just trying to see if I can merge a couple for you just to get to help everybody.
And there will be opportunities, obviously, at the end of the webinar to ask further questions that we can't cover today. But I can imagine this is a very popular area.
Absolutely. If an individual is subsequently made redundant, is there any reference made to the furlough period income? I guess that's the same in terms of employment contract, Jonathan?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, so if they're made redundant subsequently, have they worked any of their notice period for the redundancy whilst they're on furlough? If that's the question, no, because it will be from the point at which they're made redundant that notice becomes payable. So whilst they're furloughed, they are continuing their continuity of service. So if, for example, that took them, if they were furloughed at 1 year and 11 months service, and they were brought back from furlough at 2 years and 2 days service, they would then become entitled to a statutory redundancy payment, which they wouldn't have been entitled to before, because continuity of service is preserved.
Okay, we need to move on. I promise you there will be, if there's more questions there, Katie, we'll get those answered at the end if we can. Thank you, Jonathan. That was really helpful. I'd like to invite and move on to the final section of this webinar today and invite Vistage Chair Bob Batty. Bob's a remarkable individual. He's not only a coach to many business leaders, he's also a very good fella as well. He's non-executive for a few firms as well, and he's a forever positive guy. So there's no one better really to chat really about surviving to thriving and exploiting the opportunities that will arise. So Bob, I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick, and good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to your new world. We're never going back to the way the world was before. This is what it is now. Now let that sink in. What we're using now with technology has been around for some time. We are now being forced to use it. And I've got to say, from where I sit as a business coach and working with peer groups, I've never been so excited and I've never seen technology work so well. So I'll start with that premise, that this is a good place to be. I get together, I've got 38 chief executives that I look after on a monthly basis. I coach them, they get together, we have speakers, etc. And obviously over this time, we're actually meeting most days on a daily basis. What's coming up as questions that everybody's asking? The first one, what are the furlough rules? We don't know. I mean, and the rumors that go on about it are quite, and thank you so much for that last one. It's clarified a lot of things to me. There's a lot of things I say, no, you can't do that. And all of a sudden say, yes, you can. You know, this opportunity with training, I believe it has to be voluntary, so you can't force somebody to be training, but it's amazing what you can maybe put under training as we move forward, just as an idea. The next question that comes out, so we're going through all that. If you like, the three parts of my discussion I'm having with people normally go around survive, so how are we surviving? How do we reset? And how do we relaunch? So, and really, I suppose what I'm going to be talking to you for the next 5 or 6, 7 minutes on this are those areas of those three things in there. So when are we going to get paid by the government? It's another really with SMEs. A lot of them now, unfortunately, and I'm sure there's some of you actually in the audience today, really live so close to the edge that it's almost a 3 months without any revenue coming in will put you out of business. Now, as a business coach, of course, we try to, you've got to have sandbag, and I'm sure Nick works with a lot of you and doing exactly the same thing. But that's the reality. The same as our employees are probably 2 months away in the normal circumstance of losing their mortgage. It's a really narrow bit, and we've got to come out of that. So when are we going to get paid? And really, if in the next 6 months things get back to normal, what are the levers you can use to move forward? So those are the questions, and I don't have answers for those. These are going out there and some great conversations. Let me move on to the next slide, because this is probably where it gets a bit more exciting. And here's what I want you to do. We've got this only opportunity we've ever had of being able to sit on a rock and imagine the future without getting a knock on the door, somebody interrupting you, etc. And I want you to imagine, what do you want your company to look like on the other side of this? What do you want it to feel like? How will you work? What technologies would you now utilize into the business? I was on a Zoom conference with 12 people just before I came onto this one, and mostly service industries. And there's an office down there of one of my clients. And here's what he said, or they said, we're probably going to reduce our office space. I don't think we're ever going to go back to having so many people in the office again. So some people are moving. A law practice in Birmingham, we're just about to lease a large property. They said, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it down to half size. Working from people from home right now is the new way of doing things. So that, how are we going to, what technologies do we now use? Having this, and I'm sure all of you sitting at home right now are doing what I do, and that's getting back onto, whether it be Zoom or whether it be Excel, and actually, I'm going to really learn this now. I'm going to really get the details. And so knowing what technologies you've got out there and utilizing the technologies is a great thing to move forward. Who will your customers be, or who do you want as your customers? If we look out there, one of the things I do with a lot of business is categorize your customers from platinum down to tin. And a platinum customer might not be about turnover, but they're so easy to deal with. They pay on time. They're ambassadors for your products and your services. They understand when things don't quite go right. They're a joy to work with. And at the other end of the scale is the tin. They pay late. They complain about everything. They're a reluctant customer. Nothing ever goes right. They take up a lot of your oxygen. So if you look at that, and then of course from tin you go to brass, from brass you go to silver, from silver you go to gold, and from gold to platinum. Now, if you look, what kind of customers do you want to work for? What do you want in there? How are you going to make sure that your golds become platinums, etc.? And for me, the tin, maybe it's a time to put their prices way up, and hopefully they go to your competitors. What's the new skills? What are people going to need in the future to work this way? And we're on it right now. This is a major part. This Zoom. Knowing how to sell on Zoom is going to be an essential skill. Look at you right now. We've got 72 or 69. It's just gone down. 2 people have just left because I'm talking. We've got 69 people in this conference right. All of them decision makers. When else can you get in front of them? And before we used to do what was called an elevator pitch, which was, you've got 90 seconds from ground floor to the 7th floor to get somebody to make action to come and see you. I say now you've got 20 minutes. You've got 20 minutes from cold to get somebody to actually want to buy off you. And you've got to hone that skill of how you communicate on Zoom. How do you dress? What do you have behind you? Whether you have a virtual, we can change your background on here. If you just look at what's going on in mine there. So I can zap in there into a virtual background that I'm talking to. I can keep people focused on what I want to do. How do I dress? Using this technology of presentations, and we can practice this is training. This is what I call training, is your salespeople working with each other of honing the skill, using other companies, friends, these 72 people we've got here, using friends to act as potential clients and tell them how well customers are doing, moving that forward in there is an absolute way of working for. And here's the other thing. You've now got the opportunity to put your strategic plan into place. Plan it. Get your plan down. Now, if a furloughed, of course, you can't get your senior management team sitting around, but you as a leader can vision what your future is going to look like. What do you want? And it's a time to put that into place. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. Yesterday afternoon, I had Roger Martin Fagg on one of my Zoom conferences talking about the economy, and it was uplifting. All of a sudden, what he did with us was taken out of this, we can't control anything, into we have control. And if you have a look at the trends, if you have a look at what's going on, it's Jim Collins says in there when he's looking at this, that this too will pass. And as a leader, your leadership skills now have never been more important. You can probably tell from my accent, I come from Africa. And in Africa, we have villagers, and chiefs look after villagers, and these chiefs lie under trees and they drink beer and they talk to their mates about all the good stuff that's going on. And little Billy will go by with a herd of cattle and he'll say, put it down the bottom field, and they carry on talking. And people bring him beer and he sits around leisurely looking at. During good times, the easiest job in the world is leadership. You're putting out bonuses, you're patting people on the back, you're giving them parties. Life is wonderful. Now, today is when leadership comes into its own. And in Africa, this is where they take that fat guy from underneath the tree and they push him in forward and say, you go and fight them. You go and do it. And that's what's happening here right now. Your leadership skills now, what you get paid the big bucks for, comes into its own. And you think about your people now that are working from home. Think about how they're operating. Think about how lonely they are. And as has been said by some of the other fabulous panelists, how much more work they're doing. And are you phoning them up, asking them how they're doing, asking how they're finding this home working? Are telling them the empathy of how difficult it is to work while your little kid is licking the screen while you're trying to put an Excel spreadsheet together? It's the world they're now living in. Are you sympathizing? Are you still doing one-to-ones with them? Are you still engaging? A lot of companies now, and I'm sure you're doing it, but if you're not, they're having virtual coffee mornings and they're getting together and have coffee. On a Friday evening, I've been invited to 5 parties this evening, virtual parties of virtual drinking, which is kind of fun. So you sit there and people chat and these go on. But just how do you keep this culture that's cost you a fortune? How do you keep it together moving forward? Okay. After this, so there's a boom coming. Roger reckons by September, they'll be opening the gates again. People will be going back to work, not altogether, but it will happen. Our problem is going to be this. First of all, is lack of expertise. Where is our people coming from? Where is our supplies coming from? Now, if you're not doing something clever with furloughing and holiday payment, imagine what happens if we go back to work in September. All your staff are going to say, can I have my holiday now? Now, a lot of companies are saying, okay, there's 80% furlough, and what I'm going to be doing is paying you half a day's holiday pay per week. So therefore, they're having holiday payment, which is making up the difference. So everybody's not going away when you come back. Supply issues is going to be major because everybody's going to be starting up together. And the other thing that Roger says is inflation is going to come in. So we should expect inflation again, but it's going to be boom time. If you've got the money and you've got the resources, you can take advantage. And as has been said by some magnificent people before, this is when you go for a loan. This is when you get your government loan. Put it in your back pocket. You're going to need it. There's going to be some fabulous companies that's up for acquisition that you can take hold of. There's going to be some phenomenal people that now, because they've realized what the companies they're working for has a culture less than yogurt, are going to want to come and work for you because it's a great company. So I say, you know, grab it, grab the nettle with both hands, use this and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. That was wonderfully enthusiastic and uplifting and very positive and just what we want. I'm very conscious of time now, so I'm going to move through my section fairly quickly because we have lots of questions naturally coming through for Jonathan and furloughing, and some there for Pippa and some there for Bob. So I'm just going to very briefly continue Bob's theme really and just think about the 8 things we business owners or senior management team need to be doing now to replace the potential lost revenue so we can progress once this global crisis is over. So the first thing I'd like to say is Bob mentioned there on leadership. You know, us business owners, we got our businesses to where they are today. No one could have really planned for COVID-19. So first thing I would suggest to you all is you believe in yourselves. This is absolutely key. Now is not the time for procrastination. You need to lead, you need to be decisive, and you need to act, and you need to be there for your employees and your customers and clients. They really depend upon you now. You got the company where it is today, and you will lead and drive it through this crisis. And the reasons why you should believe in yourself is for 3 things. Firstly, you're an entrepreneur. You know, you've displayed the entrepreneurial skills to get the business where it is today, and you've not lost these skills. You're the entrepreneur that's grasped the opportunities in the past and won customers and won investments. You've shown the ability to adapt and you've shown flexibility. You've got the opportunity now in adversity, as Bob mentioned, to get to the other side, and it may be difficult to see that today, but when the current crisis passes, there will be opportunities. And that's a fundamental characteristic of great business owners. they find a way through this and they keep going. Second thing why I believe you should believe in yourself is you're a grafter. You know, you've got where you are. It's no secret because of the hard work that you've put in. So today is the day that you need to roll up your sleeves. I'm sure you are, and getting stuck in. Now's not the time to down your tools. And the third reason why you should believe in yourself is you are the leader. You know, you've got to be positive. Remember, good comes from bad, as we witnessed how many firms that are still with us now that were born during the Second World War. So continue to persevere in the face of adversity and be true to your values. But remember, you can't do this alone. You need to access support values. It is lonely at the top. So people like Bob and Paul and Jason, any team, your team, I'm leaning on Anna a lot at the moment and the rest of our team. You know, you can't do this alone. You need your external and internal supporters. So the first thing I would say is believe in yourself. Secondly, you need to empower your team. Where you can, obviously, it's not always possible. They're going to be naturally worried at the moment about their health and the family's health and, of course, their job. So this is where your paternal instincts really need to take over in supporting them through this period. And this will really give you an opportunity to foster a togetherness you could never have dreamed of before this crisis. So if you're not already there after this, you may be moved from a family business to a business family. So embrace that team, empower your team, but equally, you know, your team needs to stand up and fight for your business today and meet the challenges head on. They need to show commitment like they've never shown before. They need to show flexibility, not only in the working practices, but with the job description. Jonathan may have something to say about that maybe, but you know, it's a call to arms where the team must do what it's necessary to get through this with as little damage as possible. So you need to empower that team. You can't do it alone. And it's what we call delegate to elevate. So empowering that team to give them responsibilities, as I mentioned, beyond the job descriptions, shifting priorities of the team to critical work, but also freeing you and other senior employees to focus on what you do best, which often for the business owner is rainmaking and securing new channels of work. And that leads me to the third consideration, is finding new customers and markets. Again, Bob did touch on this, but if we all have enough work and it's profitable work, so it's Bob's platinum clients, this solves all of your business problems. You know, if we've all got enough work, it's fine as long as it's profitable. There's no point having the best operational systems or procedures if your staff make no sales and we generate no work. So like your competitors over the last few weeks, you've been focusing on the here and now, you know, putting out fires, maintaining normal operations. Yet now could be a real opportunity for you to network with prospective customers. So putting that time and effort into generating new leads that will ensure that you have a pool of potential customers to rely on once things have calmed down. So take time out, consider where these new customers are, and devise a plan of action to take your product or services to them. In addition, this should give these people that you're approaching confidence that you're still in business, that you're looking for new clients at a time of competition is going through a crisis, and you're showing your customers that you're on top of things. Finally, consider ways you can diversify your business. This is a great survival technique, and many successful businesses deploy this to help you get through not only this crisis, but you know, there'll be one in the future as well. So diversification will actually help you and give you greater chances of surviving and profiting. Point 4, I'm going to skip through fairly quickly, conscious of time, but finding new ways to deliver your services. We're seeing this now with, you know, the local butchers doing deliveries and different ways that they can deliver their services. And you need to brainstorm this and think about how can you deliver your service differently. And we're all doing this on Zoom today. I had a seminar booked that was due to take place yesterday at the Hotel de Van. Got cancelled, of course, but here we are doing a webinar. So you need to think of different ways of delivering your service. And again, on point 5, ensure the service product remains relevant after COVID-19. It's important to consider not only you surviving business during this outbreak, but also have a strategy in place for what's going to happen afterwards. Don't assume that once the threats of public health has passed, things will go back to the way they were after and during the outbreak. So consider first being confined to the homes will likely lead to many of these customers switching online or otherwise to remote solutions. And you shouldn't assume that post coronavirus that people will go back to the solutions they had before. So it's both a threat and an opportunity. We will get back to normal, but it's going to be a new normal, and make sure your product and service can survive in that new normal. It really is a game changer, COVID-19. The history has taught us that game changes often lead to positive developments in the not too distant future. The classic one here, rewrite your 2020 and 3-year business plan. Again, fortune not only favours the brave, but also the prepared. So it's so important, as Pippa pointed out, that you need to be looking at your numbers, your cash flow in the next weeks, months, and the next 12 months, but also think about your challenges that you're going to have with the business, but also clearly look at solutions to those challenges. And you should strategize and implement these at all of the above points. And a good starting point for any of this is to list those challenges, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and look at different scenarios that could happen to these challenges. So consider things like disruption to your supply chains, difficulties in communication, bad debts, generating customers, and competition with other businesses in your market. Regardless of how this is going to pan out and how this might affect you, plans for every scenario need to be considered. So list your challenges and think about the solutions that you have. But also, the final thing I'd say on this point, don't let fear drive your decision. Try and stay as rational as possible and think medium to longer term. And think about, again, what your business will look like after this crisis. Point 7, again, having to work on the business when you're extremely busy is often a luxury, but guess what? It's become a necessity now. You really need to work on that business. And it just may give you and the team the opportunity whilst you're working at home to look at those systems and procedures, maybe introduce new technology, that when this crisis is over, you'll come back a far more efficient, productive business, which will in turn increase that profitability and help you recover lost income. This time may allow you and the team to sharpen your skills. Now, a gentleman was mentioned earlier, a guy called Andy Dawson from Curium, and I got this from him and a colleague of him, and he mentioned Abraham Lincoln, who said, if you give me the task of chopping down a tree and you give me 6 hours, I will spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. So think about that. The question is, how are you going to sharpen your team's axe? So use this time to improve your business. So when this crisis is over, you are lean, fit, and ready to launch out the starting blocks and get ahead. The final thing, and it's been covered by many people today, cash is king. Businesses generally don't go bust, they run out of money. So think about your cash that will get you through this global crisis in the short term. And again, if you're not fortunate position to have a strong balance sheet, look at the business disruption loans, look at cutting out unnecessary expenditure where you can, but also deploy your resources to any income generating activities that is crucial for you at this moment in time. Okay, very conscious of time. We will run over the allotted time, and we have done already, so apologies for that. But there are lots of questions coming in, so I'd like to hand over to Katie, who can perhaps raise a few of those.
No problem, Nick. Most of these are furlough questions, so sorry, Jonathan. On to you. And some of them are may well be short answers, so please feel free to. We can burn through them. Can furlough employees get a second job to top up their salary?
It depends. I'm a lawyer. There's no such thing as a short answer. I'll be as swift as I can. If you have a contract with them that says they can't work for anybody else, you will need to vary that contract if you want them to go. You want them to have the ability to go elsewhere. So it depends what your contract says to start with. The employee will also need to be very careful, because if they've already got 2 jobs, then that will be fine. They can be furloughed from one and not furloughed from another. That will not be a problem at all. If they then start going to work for another job, they need to be careful that HMRC don't come and look at them for that and wonder what's going on. And in particular, as the employer from job one, if you like, you want to be careful that HMRC don't start coming to look for you. So short answer is it depends. Look at your contract to start with, but be careful.
Okay, Thank you. Can you rotate teams on furlough, provided it's a minimum of 3 weeks, and put people back into furlough?
My guess on this, and again we're waiting for the law to come out, is I don't think that the government will go for that.
Okay.
Because there's two elements of why furlough has come up. One, to stop people being laid off, so to stop people losing their job, they've introduced furlough. But the other thing that they've brought furlough in is to keep the social distancing. And I think it's a little bit anti-intuitive to say that you can go in for 3 weeks, out for 3 weeks, in for 3 weeks, because you're not keeping that social distancing going. So whilst the legislation isn't out yet, I don't think the government will like that.
Okay. Can you furlough the MD?
Well, you can furlough the MD on the position, because obviously he or she will generally sit with 3 hats. So his employment, I think, as Pippa touched on, is low salary or high dividends. His salary elements could be furloughed. His dividends can't.
Okay. Is furlough appropriate for staff who are shielding or cannot work currently due to childcare?
That's actually a really interesting question, because the way you furlough staff, you've got to be careful about how you select the people that you're going to furlough. So what I would suggest that you do is you have a very rough and ready matrix for who you're going to select, because what you don't want to get accused of is discriminating against somebody. So being accused of, I should have been furloughed or I shouldn't have been furloughed. One of the big things that will come out of this is if you are accused of discrimination, you will need a legitimate aim. So you've got to have a proportionate measure to achieve a legitimate aim to defend a discrimination case. And actually, I think that giving priority to pregnant employees or staff who are shielding, because they're either on that 1.5 million list or they do have additional health concerns, you will be able to achieve a defence of a proportionate measure to achieve a legitimate aim, just for some legal speak. So yes, I think actually it's a good idea to put those people as a priority to furlough.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. What are the impacts on GDPR with staff working from home? We work for an insurance company, and they are data controllers. We have contracts with INS companies, and we have no agreement to modify their permissions under GDPR.
GDPR it's got its own special issues, and I did see that question in the chat, and I have somewhere, and I've been trying to look for it while I was on, and I can't find it at the moment. I've got a bit of a fact sheet that covers this, which I'll whiz around later.
We'll put it on the resources with your permission.
Yeah, that's fine. I just I can't do it while I'm on here because I'm not clever enough.
Right, I'm just making sure we've covered everything. We had the one about rotating teams. Can you rotate teams on furlough if you have to split the workforce, provided it's a minimum of 3 weeks? Have we covered that one?
I think we covered that one earlier. And
yeah.
Rules don't say, well, there are no rules yet, but my personal reaction is I don't think the government will go for that.
Okay. I think that's all the furlough ones. Thank you, Nick.
No more questions for anyone else, Katie, before we close the seminar, webinar even.
Cash is a real pain point for some. Many business owners, banks don't seem to be as nimble as business require. More of a comment than a question, but I think everyone's kind of feeling that pinch at the moment.
Yeah,
hang on. Sorry, Nick, we have got one more. John Beggan, is there a time limit in applying for the small business grant and the criteria associated? Maybe to Pippa?
The small business grant, I think this is referring to some businesses that are in either retail or hospitality, potentially. So I believe that there's no time limit, but obviously I would crack on with that. And
Okay.
there are other grants available to businesses that are small business rate payers on premises. Now that is being pushed down through local councils. So I believe that the local councils will be in touch with people that are able to apply for that, and it will depend on your business rateable value.
Okay, thank you.
Right, no more questions, Katie?
Not that I can see, thank you.
Okay, well, that concludes the webinar. I do apologise for running over. I ideally hope that this has provided some value to everyone who's attended today's session. I'd like to say a big thank you for the panellists, not only for their time given up today, but also for preparing for this session. So again, thank you very much for everyone. And, you know, we're all in this together. We will be sending copies of this webinar over with resources and contact number for all the panellists. So if there are any individual questions that you have regarding to furloughing of workers or relating to tax and cash flow, or you need further information about the chamber or Made in the Midlands, then please do get in contact with the individuals. And thank you, Katie, for fielding all of those questions today. If there are any questions that we haven't answered that come in a bit later, we will try and answer those for the individuals concerned. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.